So, usually when you think about a really gritty, deeply felt concept album, something with like real soul, you imagine a very specific physical space, right?
Oh, yeah, like a cramped, sweaty studio somewhere.
Exactly. You picture session musicians making eye contact across a room to, nail a tempo change.
Yeah.
Or a singer leaning into this vintage microphone until their voice just cracks.
Right, because the assumption is that soul requires friction. It requires human bodies in a room.
Yeah, totally. But the source material we're diving into today, and welcome to Deep Dive, by the way, completely shatters that assumption.
It really does.
We are looking at a project brief and the liner notes for this massive 36-track, hour and 47-minute concept album. It's called Life Outside the Lines, Songs for Women Who Stopped Explaining.
Such a great title.
Right. But here's the crazy paradox we're going to explore with you today. This entire unapologetically human, deeply soulful album was, it was generated by machines.
Yeah, which is just wild to think about.
It is. We're looking at a project where artificial intelligence isn't just a helpful little studio assistant. The AI is the actual instrument itself.
And that forces a total reevaluation of, well, how art is made. I mean, this is the ultimate stress test for AI, right? Asking it to carry the emotional weight of a highly specific human narrative.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what we're looking at isn't just an album, it's a blueprint for a totally new kind of artistry. Our mission today is to figure out how one creator used a completely digital tech stack to, engineer a sonic universe that feels incredibly physical.
Almost like a phantom conductor for a digital orchestra.
Yes. Perfect analogy. And to understand this album, we actually have to start by looking at the machinery. The liner notes are, they're incredibly transparent about the pipeline.
They list everything.
Yeah, they list Google Flow Music, Claude, ChatGPT, Meta AI, perchance. But how do these completely different tools actually talk to each other to make a cohesive 36-track album?
Well, it requires a highly orchestrated assembly line. I mean, you can't just walk up to ChatGPT and say, hey, make me a masterpiece.
Right, it doesn't work like that.
Exactly. So the creator used the text-based models like Claude and ChatGPT to act as the conceptual brain. They write the lyrical frameworks, generate the emotional parameters.
But AI tends to be kind of boring on its own, right? It trends toward the average.
That's the main risk, yeah. It wants to be predictable. And that is where perchance comes in.
Oh, the randomization tool.
Right. By feeding the concepts through a randomizer, the creator injects unpredictable variables, so like a sudden tempo shift or a weird chord progression, before feeding it all into Google Flow Music to actually render the audio.
So they're basically programming the happy accidents that usually happen in a live studio.
Precisely. And the way they assembled those files is just as important. The notes say all the final mixing was done on an alpha build of Audacity 4 running on Linux Ubuntu 26.04.
They highlight that detail so prominently. But, for anyone listening who isn't a huge software nerd, why does it matter that they used Linux in an unstable alpha version of a mixer?
Because it's a massive philosophical statement about infrastructure.
How so?
Well, in the traditional music industry, you're locked into proprietary multi-million-dollar ecosystems. Major labels, expensive studios, gated software like Pro Tools.
Oh, right.
But Linux is open source. Audacity is open source. The creator is intentionally building this entirely outside the corporate music machinery.
It's open source all the way down.
Exactly. They are demonstrating a completely decentralized, independent way to produce a stadium-level album from a laptop.
Which makes the liner notes even more fascinating, because they list all those algorithms we just talked about. But the very first credit, stamped in all caps, is the word human.
Yeah, human. First thing you see.
And I'm struggling with that a bit. If I'm playing devil's advocate here, if the machine plays the guitar, sings the runs, physically generates every sound wave, how can the human claim to be the musician? Aren't they just typing a glorified wish list?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it requires us to look at this through the lens of a film director.
Oh, interesting.
Right. A film director might never touch the camera, they might not write the script, and they certainly don't stand in front of the lens and act. But no one questions if the director is the author of the movie.
Right, because they hold the vision.
Exactly. The director's job is vision, constraint, curation. In this AI paradigm, the machine is the session player and the camera crew. But the emotional specificity, the taste, that is entirely human.
And that taste really lives in the prompt. If this tech stack is the studio, The text prompt is the sheet music.
Yeah.
And looking at the actual prompts in the source material, it reads less like code and more like, I don't know, a moody short story.
The level of granularity is just staggering. They aren't asking for a generic, sad acoustic song.
No, they demand this highly specific aesthetic. I think the exact phrase was cinematic Americana noir with psychedelic soul undercurrents.
Which is such a wild combination.
It really is. They anchored the genre using 4 totally distinct artists. They wanted the literary feel of 𝗑𗕑ᗕ mixed with the dark cinematic quality of Nick Cave.
Right.
But then they forced the AI to blend that with the gritty soul of 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗡 and the, unhurried bass grooves of ◑👉🏆. I mean, how does an algorithm synthesize those 4 human vibes into one sound?
It manages it because the human didn't just give the AI ingredients, they gave it incredibly strict boundaries.
Like putting it in a box.
Yeah, it's a concept we could call deliberate scarcity. If you leave an audio AI alone, its natural tendency is maximalism. It wants to fill every frequency.
Right, it wants to add a 50-piece orchestra and layer a dozen vocal tracks.
Exactly, to create this flawless, massive pop sound.
Which would completely ruin a gritty Americana album.
Completely.
Right.
So the creator actively restricts it. The prompt insists on analog warmth, room sound, and literal tape hiss.
Tape hiss.
Yeah. It commands the AI to use pedal steel and electric guitar as the emotional spine, with brushed drums, and crucially, it puts a leash on everything else.
Right, the Hammond organ.
Yes, the prompt dictates the Hammond organ can only ever be used for background texture, never as a lead, and strings are restricted to just 2 or 3 tracks out of the 36.
It even dictates the weather. The prompt actually says, temperature, mostly cool and dry, occasionally on fire, and it specifies the setting isn't just some vague chilly place, but explicitly Chicago, winter into spring.
Which is so brilliant.
But how does an AI interpret a demand for a Chicago winter?
Well, it translates the environment into audio parameters. So a cool and dry Chicago winter tells the AI to use shorter reverb tails, mimicking the deadened sound of snow.
Oh, wow.
Or it prioritizes close-mic'd vocals that sound intimate and isolated. By forcing the AI into this deliberate scarcity and specific geography, they prevent it from making generic elevator music.
You know, if you're listening to this and thinking AI is just a lazy shortcut for people who don't want to learn an instrument, this brief completely upends that. To avoid bland output, the human actually had to be more articulate, more literary.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the prompt itself becomes an artifact. You have to be a poet to program the machine correctly.
You really do. But a world this specific, a cold Chicago street scored by a 𝗑𗕑ᗕ and Nick Cave hybrid, needs someone to inhabit it. Who is a woman who stopped explaining?
Oh, the protagonist. The brief details a character who completely defies the usual archetypes handed to women in music.
Right, she's described as self-possessed, privately philosophical, and physically present.
And crucially, the notes say she's paid the full price for living on her own terms and considers it a fair deal.
There's no tragedy there. The source material points out she actively refuses narrative conventions. There's no redemption arc because she doesn't think she needs saving.
Right, no cautionary tale.
Exactly. And no tearful acoustic confession. The title is literal. She stopped explaining herself to the audience.
This raises an important question, right? It synthesizes how rare it is to see a female character in music allowed to simply exist.
Yeah.
She's not a victim. She's not a hypersexualized caricature. She's just living her life. And you see that in the prompt's theme, especially around sobriety and aging.
Yes, the prompt tackles sobriety and desire, but there's a massive warning. It is not a recovery narrative.
Right. It's not about the struggle.
No, sobriety is treated as a lens. It's about experiencing conscious, unblurred desire. She wants to feel what she wants in high definition, not numb it.
Which ties right into the theme of longevity and aging. The creator demands an exploration of a woman refusing the cultural script that says she should quietly fade away as she gets older.
Track 12, I think.
Yes, track 12. Still in the frame, she refuses to step out of the picture.
You know, when you think about the deliberate scarcity of the music we talked about, like burying the Hammond organ, stripping out the big strings, it perfectly matches her.
Oh, absolutely.
The music doesn't beg for your attention with flashy solos. And she doesn't beg for your understanding with long explanations. They both just kind of hold their ground.
Form and function are completely aligned there.
So if she isn't heading toward a tragic downfall or a big triumphant redemption, where does a 36-track album actually go?
The creator mapped her life across a very unconventional 3-act structure. The pacing is fascinating. Act 1 opens with driving, purposeful road energy.
City lights in motion.
Yeah, exactly. But then she moves through a series of encounters: erotic, absurd, elegiac.
And then right at the height of all that movement, the album just hits a wall in the best way.
Yeah.
Track 4 is called Midpoint Stillness.
Yes.
The prompt forced the AI to drop the entire band and generate a solo Chopin-adjacent piano piece. It creates this sudden, jarring sense of interiority.
You go from the noise of the city straight into her private thoughts.
Yeah.
And that stillness acts as a gateway to the back half of the album, which deepens into themes of real loss. And you can track that evolution just by looking at the song titles.
The track list is like a thematic map. And what stands out is how unsentimental it is, especially around physicality. Titles like Bone and Soul, The Rented Bone, Sodium and Steel.
Notice the elemental materials there: sodium, steel, iron, salt. The body isn't romanticized. It's a working thing enduring a harsh environment.
And that endurance bleeds into the theme of kintsugi and repair.
The Japanese art of fixing broken pottery with gold.
Exactly, making it more valuable than the original. There are tracks like Gold in the Crags and the Mending. It's about reinforcing the fracture lines.
Which is the reality of the daily grind. The prompt really hits on endurance and labor. The AI was instructed to write songs like The Iron Slog and Just Tuesday.
I love Just Tuesday. Because, an AI usually wants to write epic poetry about the end of the world.
Right, the greatest love of all time.
Yeah. It takes a very specific human prompt to force an algorithm to understand the unglamorous, exhausting reality of a long shift on a random Tuesday.
It grounds the AI in the mundane. Desire and endurance are just facts to be named while you try to get through the week.
You also see that with how it handles people. There's a track called Human Turnstile, which implies this exhausting, mechanical series of encounters.
Or Paperman, which sounds incredibly deflating.
Right. And of course, the Chicago setting permeates everything. Track titles like Radiator Hiss literally pull the background noise of the city forward.
Yeah.
If you've lived in an old building during a brutal winter, that title alone gives you a sensory memory.
The track list really is a map of her psychology, but there's a structural anomaly in there that reveals so much about the creator's intent.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, the variations. Throughout the album, titles echo each other. You have Iron and Salt, and then later, The Salt and the Iron.
Yep.
But the detail that blew my mind is track 16. It's titled Iron and Salt, alt take. Now think about what an alternate take actually is.
Right, in a traditional studio.
Yeah, a drummer misses a beat, or the singer is pitchy, and the producer says, hey, let's roll tape and try that again.
But a machine doesn't make mistakes like that.
Exactly.
An AI can generate 1 million technically perfect variations in seconds. It doesn't need to do a second run-through.
So intentionally labeling a track as an alt take and putting it on the album, that is a brilliant act of world building.
It really is.
They're using the machine to synthesize the illusion of human error.
Yeah.
They're faking a studio session that never physically happened.
Because the creator isn't just generating audio, they're curating a mythology. It creates an aura of authenticity for the character.
Which brings us to the final destination of her journey. After 35 tracks of endurance, mechanical encounters, and Chicago winters, we hit track 36, The Slow Thaw.
And the creator's notes on this are vital. They explicitly state this is not a victory lap.
Which is so unusual. Concept albums usually condition us to expect a massive crescendo. We want her on top of a mountain screaming she conquered her demons, or a definitive tragedy where everything falls apart.
The slow thaw refuses both of those extremes. There is no neat resolution where all the loose threads are tied up. It just ends in quiet pleasure. It's the simple, grounded realization that spring is finally arriving in Chicago. The joy of still being alive, still being present, still wanting things.
It prioritizes presence over resolution. And, for everyone listening, in a world where every single piece of media demands a hot take or an explosive ending, how refreshing is it to just experience stillness and thaw?
It's a much more accurate reflection of human life. We rarely get cinematic conclusions. We mostly just survive the winter and feel the temperature change.
So true. We started this deep dive asking a crazy question. Can a machine, running entirely on code, generate a truly gritty, soulful, unapologetically human concept album?
And the answer is yes, but only because a human was standing behind the machine, forcing it to understand the nuance of a Tuesday or the sound of a hissing radiator.
It requires a phantom conductor. And it leaves you with something really fascinating to consider.
Yeah.
I spend so much time worrying that AI is going to replace our humanity or flatten our art.
Right.
But when you look at an album like this, built around a woman who refuses to be easily explained,
you realize the AI didn't replace the human at all. It acted as a highly complex mirror. If you know exactly who you are and you have the vocabulary to describe it, these machines might just be the most powerful tools we've ever built for reflecting our messy, unexplainable selves right back to us.